All right. Well, today we're going to talk about the advanced modes of ventilation. You remember we talked about we're going to talk about three different lectures about ventilation. One of them is we talked about the old modes of ventilation, the CMV, the AC and SIMV. The other one we talked about current modes of ventilation, which are pressure support, AC, VCV, and PCV, pressure control and volume control. And today we're going to talk about advanced modes of ventilation, which are Aprv biphasic, or Aprv bilevel. That's number one. That's going to take the most time. And two other modes of ventilation also that are considered advanced. One of them is AVAPs, which we talked about briefly when we talked about pressure support, and VSync. Okay, so for AVAPs, here, sorry. Yeah, so quickly again to remind with the AVAPs is adjustable volume assured pressure support. These are all dual triggering modes. And basically it's a volume assured pressure support, so it is pressure support. And as we talked before, we said it goes like this. You order CPAP, what's the beep you want? I want 5, and I want 500 tidal volume, for example. You don't order pressures. So it goes like this, it gives whatever pressure it takes to achieve the 500 tidal volume. Okay, let's say 18. And then when you improve, you start seeing that you don't need 18 the machine sees that you don't need 18 because when it gives 18, when it gives 18, it gives you 600 tidal volume, for example. So the machine adjusts it and actually go to 15. And still this area under the curve is 500, and it doesn't need as much pressure, 15 now. And it keeps doing that until you reach to very low levels, and that's you weaned yourself basically. You don't need an intensivist. Next generation, if we have an arm that goes in and extubate the patient, then you don't need anything. You just send the patient with a tube home. So that's the AVAPs. We have this available in the BiPAP machine. It can be used as a BiPAP mode and also a vent mode. We are trying, beginning from this month, we're trying to use AVAPs as on every BiPAP patient on the second day, right? Let's try to remember that. I don't want to make it more automatic, but I think we're going to have to remember to actually do the AVAPs as a second mode of BiPAP on every patient. Why? When they come in with BiPAP, they come in with, they're very sick. We give them a rate, we give them, very high, IPAP and 25/5 or whatever. It's blowing in their face like this, but they love it because they're short of breath the first day. The second day they wake up and they fight you when they put the BiPAP because they don't want it, because it's too much for them or it's hurting them, and then the course starts to become a little bit more prolonged and stuff like that. If you give them something like this, you don't need anybody to titrate it. You can send them to the floor with it, and number two, they are comfortable with it, right? This doesn't offer an advantage over the regular BiPAP. It doesn't make you oxygenate or ventilate better, but it's just comfort. The other mode of ventilation is only available on vent, and it's very similar to PRVC, which is pressure regulated volume control. I don't know why they have these two, but they have pressure regulated volume control and they have VSync. They're very, very similar to each other. VSync it cannot be mode by itself. It has to be a subset or a sub-mode of VCV. This one is a mode by itself. And what it does is basically when you order volume control here in Brockton Hospital, you are ordering, when you order volume control, you are ordering pressure delivered breath. Because as we talked before, we talked yesterday extensively how important or how better the characteristics of pressure delivered breath. It's not a pressure control because you can't control the eye time and all this. It's just you can control the way that the breath is being given. So yes, you can, when you order VCV, you are getting actually VSync, unless you go actually and cancel this. There is a way to cancel this and give classic VCV. Right? So nobody use the bellows anymore in Brockton Hospital. No bellows. Right? So how does it work? It's basically you order the regular settings for volume control. You're not gonna feel any difference in the ordering for volume control. The tidal volume, the FiO2, the respiratory rate, and the PEEP. But the machine, what it does is that it gives the first breath as a volume control breath of 500 or 600 tidal volume that you ordered, and then measures how much inspiratory pressure is required to achieve this 600 tidal volume, and all the subsequent breaths are pressure delivered breath until your compliance changes and your 20, let's say this is 20 that's required, and your 20 resulted in a smaller tidal volume. Then the machine retests again. Okay? And then when it retests, it'll be okay, it needs 25 now. We'll give him 25 from now on. And it keeps going up and down. Obviously, there's a pop-off valve that you can't go above. So you can't go above certain level, whatever the level is, usually 35. Okay? So these are two advanced modes of ventilation. AVAPs, VSync or PRVC, similar to each other. Now let's spend a good amount of time now talking about Aprv. So Aprv, you can probably know what's happening to the mode if you just concentrate on the name. The name is basically airway pressure release ventilation. Yeah? So basically, as if you're saying that the airway pressure is going to be maintained for a long period of time, and it's released very briefly every once in a while. So it goes like this. Long time and very short time when you actually exhale. So that's basically the mode. The need for Aprv started about maybe people want to think about Aprv long time ago. As I told you, there was attempts to actually make Aprv similar modes, time cycled modes and stuff in 90s, 80s and 90s. But you know the mode came out about 25 years ago. So news to users of the bellows. 25 years ago, this mode, I was playing with this mode when I was a fellow. So, in any case, so it's not like a new, invented yesterday. But anyway, the need for this happened when we had patients with inverse ratio pressure control, and they actually are inverse ratio pressure control. They have to be paralyzed, like we talked yesterday, right? When patients are on inverse ratio pressure control, they have to be paralyzed because they're very, very hypoxic. And inverse ratio looks like this. Okay, that's pressure control now. This patient has to be paralyzed. So a day passes by, a second day passes by, and we're getting now worried. We need to get the patient off the paralytic, right? But if we get him off the paralytic, he's going to be hypoxic. So what are we going to do? We need to get him off the paralytic and put him on a mode of ventilation that will give us a long eye time like this, or even longer, without the need for paralysis. And hence comes Aprv, and it looks like this. Right? So basically, you can see from here, it's actually much longer compared to this. But the patient tolerates this without paralysis and doesn't tolerate this without paralysis. Why? Because of?
They can breathe on top of it.
Yeah, because they can breathe on top of it. Here, they can't. So if I'm holding them for 2 seconds for pressure control, they can't do anything. If they wake up, they want to breathe, the tachypnic, obviously these people, they can't breathe. The mode doesn't allow them to doesn't even assist them to breathe, doesn't even open a valve for them to breathe on their own, nothing. It's like suffocation. So they can't tolerate it. We have to paralyze them for a mode like this. This one, they can just breathe whatever they want. So you go like this. And believe it or not, this is actually makes the patient even more comfortable. Because if you think about it, for the patient, he doesn't know what your plan is, doesn't know what the mode is. What he knows, what he noticed, is that there is a huge amount of CPAP or PEEP, like this, and he can breathe normally and comfortably on top of that, huh? But then every once in a while something weird happens. He goes up and goes up again. Doesn't matter, it doesn't really affect him that much, and it happens every 6 seconds or something. So it's not like a frequent occurrence. So the patient requires less sedation than other modes of even volume control.
Are they able to breathe during the exhalation phase?
Yes. Yes, but for the classic Aprv, it's very, very short. So when we're talking today, I'm going to spend the majority of time talking about classic Aprv and a small amount of time talking about bi-level. What we're using here on all the patients is bi-level, right? But it's like the son from the father. I can't talk from I can't flip it, right? I have to talk about the classic one first, and that's the mode that actually saves lives more than a bi-level, Anyway, so somebody needs to count the claims to fame. When you were counting the claims to fame the last time, you failed to count them. Let's count them again. Maybe we can write them one by one. So we talked about how it requires less sedation and doesn't require paralysis. Alright, these are two claims to fame we talked about. So as we know, we need to every mode of ventilation that we study or learn about, we have to ask about what are the set parameters, what are the dependent parameters, and what are the waveforms. So this is the pressure waveform now. What are the set parameters? Set parameters are from here to here. That's called the low pressure, which ranges between 0 to 5. Very, very small. And then from here to here, all the way down to here, all the way to the 0, is high pressure. And that ranges between 25 to 35. All of these are startup settings, right? Startup settings. You can change them. And from here to here is called the high time, and that ranges between 4 to 8 seconds. Very long. And then this one from here to here is the low time, and that ranges between 0.3 to 0.7 seconds. Very short, right? And then in addition to all of this, so what are the 4 important parameters here? High time, high pressure, low pressure. Easy to remember, right? In addition to that, you can actually do pressure support. So each one of those small breaths, you can support it with pressure support breath, which is 0 to 10 usually. That's how we start. And then you add the FiO2 to the mix, and that means you have 6 set parameters. Remember yesterday we said you have 4 set parameters for volume control, 5 set parameters for pressure control and SIMV, and 6 set parameters for Aprv and bi-level. So that's your set parameters. The dependent parameters are everything else, right? So basically the tidal volume is a dependent parameter, the mandatory respiratory rate, or we can call it release respiratory rate. This is called the release breath. Spontaneous respiratory rate, release minute ventilation, spontaneous minute ventilation, and so on. And mean airway pressure and all of these things are dependent parameters. Now, the next waveform is the flow waveform, right? These are the two that we usually look at when we go see the vent. This is the second waveform on your vent screen usually. And the flow waveform, if you're gonna forget everything about what we talked about today, if you decide to forget everything, don't forget this one. This is how you're gonna kill patients, right? So if you go to a new place and say, I wanna wanna just switch this to Aprv, okay? Especially if you're practicing, no, if you're practicing in the Midwest or the west part of the country, you're fine. If you're practicing in the Northeast, you're an idiot until proven otherwise. When you walk in a hospital, you're an idiot until proven otherwise. So you gotta go and it's like, I have to put the patient on Aprv. They gotta say no, you're not putting anybody on Aprv. You're just a young attending. I'm not listening to you. And then you stomp your feet and put the patient on Aprv, and then the patient had pneumothorax because of it. They will never ever. They get stamped idiot forever. They will never change their mind again, right? So be careful. So, how does the flow waveform look like? So it looks like this: no flow, or minimal flow, just like this. Maybe for those breaths, minimal. And then when it comes to the release breath, terms are very important, by the way. When we say release breath, it's release breath. I'll show you here. I'll show you in this lecture that you can actually kill patients. You can kill patients. Switch. With if you change the term, right? If the term, so like this. So the release breath goes down like this, right? So weird mode of ventilation, right? So what do we call this in other modes of ventilation? When the exhalation is not reaching the baseline. Auto-peep. This is called auto-peep in other mode. If you call this auto-peep in this mode of ventilation, you will have a heart attack, and the respiratory therapist will have a stroke. Because the auto-peep will be 50. So this mode of ventilation, that's another claim to fame. And this is the first thing or the most important thing that we need to learn. But another claim to fame here is the auto-peep. It actually changed our understanding of auto-peep. When we typically see auto-peep, we say, no, we have to get rid of the auto-peep, blah, blah, blah. This mode of ventilation is using auto-peep to our advantage and the patient's advantage. Right? Intentionally using the auto-peep. It's like playing with fire. You can kill patients if you abuse the auto-peep, or if you use it correctly, you can actually save his life. So how do we do that? We have to regulate the auto-peep. How do we regulate the auto-peep? We measure the maximum flow here, so it's easy on the vent. The advanced vents, you just freeze and move the cursor, and the cursor will go here and tell you this is called the peak expiratory flow. And measure here, and it's called the end expiratory flow. Okay, so if you divide the end expiratory flow by the peak expiratory flow, it should be 25 to 75%. So to give you a nice good range now, you can easily achieve that, between 25 to 75%. But if you go beyond or outside this range, then problems are going to happen, right? So Professor Megan O'Connor, how is if the ratio is 85%? What does that mean? What does it mean, and what's going to happen to the patient, and what do you do?
This is the peak expiratory flow over the
EAF divided by the PEF.
so it's you high. I don't know.
So basically, if it's high, that means what? On this curve here, that means it ended here. Because this is away from here, if you measure it on the scale. That means the EF is here because it's closer to this on the scale. That means you didn't give enough time for exhalation. That means the low time needs to be prolonged further. And that means that this patient, if you don't prolong this low time, what's going to happen to them? They're going to burst. They're going to have auto-peep and more auto-peep, and actually have barotrauma and increased venous return and all the bad effects of the auto-peep. How about if you see that the number or the ratio came out to be 10%? Professor Lyon, 10%, what does that mean?
It means that you're giving them way too much time to exhale, right?
Exactly.
So you shorten the low time.
That means this reached here, close to the baseline, right? And imagine if this waveform reached actually to the baseline, to 0 on the floor. That means that you exhaled completely. that means that the lung now is seeing what pressure? So now you achieved a pressure inside the lung of 0 or 5. That means that the ARDS lung is completely deflated, and it's like a liver now, like this. And you have to reopen it again the next breath, and it's going to injure every time you open it and cause more cytokine release and stuff like that. So that means de-recruitment. So if the ratio is low, means de-recruitment, you need to shorten the time. Okay, that's the simple way of looking at it. And that's another claim to fame to this mode. So let's assume that you're rounding in the morning. We actually, the respiratory therapist has to see this mode every 2 hours. So every 2 hours they go. Typical vents, they see it every 4 hours here, and this is every 2 hours they go and round on the vent. NPRN obviously. But I encourage everybody, nurses, residents, everybody who's walking and rounding on a patient, to actually freeze the screen and look. By freezing the screen, you're not changing the vent, so it's not like you're illegal. You can freeze the screen and look. You're not gonna change the mode. And what you do is to measure this ratio. So let's say in the morning, you measure this ratio, and the ratio is 50%. And then you come out in the afternoon and you measure it again without changing anything, and the ratio is now 60%. What is happening to the patient? Is this patient improving or worsening? This patient is improving, right? So here, 50%. So the expiratory flow and the peak expiratory flow are 50% of each other. Right? This one's 50%. Now, in order for it to be higher than that, is 60%. That means it went like this. 60. This is 50%, right? This has to be 60% here. So that means the wave looked like this now. Right? And if you think about it, the ARDS lung or the non-compliant lungs, they switched again. Unbelievable. Yeah. So the ARDS lung goes like this. Like if you let go of the pressure that's holding the air, it's so stiff that it just exhale like this. Very quickly. The COPD lung exhales like this, very long, right? And the middle is usually the normal lung. So the more you move towards very compliant lungs, which is COPD, that means your lung is getting more compliant. So going from here to here, that means the patient is improving. In addition, just to understand it more, this is also an area under the curve. So whatever the tidal volume was here between the morning round and afternoon rounds, this actually was added to the tidal volume. You'll see it even on the tidal volume. That means the patient recruited. That happens all the time. This mode is a good mode of recruitment. So you see, and that's another claim to fame, that it's another mode of recruitment here. So I would say more than 95% of the time, that is the case, that the patient improved. Okay? In a small percentage of the time, 5% or even less sometimes, less, that this is actually airway obstruction. So the curve looks like this. This is 50% of this. And actually what happened is that this didn't go down, this went up. So this is the area under the curve that is cancelled, less tidal volume. And the wave looks like it's going to take a longer time now. From here to here, it's going to take a longer time to reach to almost like a COPD waveform now. But in a bad way, not like this COPD patient, which is actually adding the tidal volume to the patient. This is actually taking tidal volume from the patient. This is very rare. You know why it's very rare? Another claim to fame to this mode. I have never, ever seen bronchoconstriction, right? Bronchospasm during Aprv, classic Aprv. You don't see it. Why? You remember when we talked about the PEEP is a way to actually treat bronchospasm? Because it just tends to, just mechanically, you know, the muscles around the bronchus wants to contract, but you're just tenting them open. You just like with the pressure inside, you're just keeping them open. You can contract whatever you want, but you won't be able to close the airway. Huh? This one, we're actually maintaining a pressure of like 35 huh? for 6 seconds. Not the PEEP 8 and 10, and we're talking about 8 and 10 and stupid numbers like this. We're talking about huge number of pressure, maintaining it for a long period of time. There's no muscle that will overcome this pressure inside the airway. So you won't ever hear bronchospasm, and that's another claim to fame to this one. That's why it's very rare to see it. The only time you'll see this is if the upper airway obstruction, like a mucus plug or a kink of the tube or something like that, that you'll see this one. But you're not gonna see it with just bronchoconstriction. Which brings me to the eternal question. Can you use, which is another claim to fame here, can you use Aprv, classic Aprv, for a patient with COPD? Because, you know, it's so short, the exhalation is so short, this could be a problem. And it is, you know, it could be a problem. But the advantage is, this is a window into your lungs. You will know what's happening to the patient. Meaning, one of the age-long questions that, you know, you get somebody who's ARDS patient, who's a COPD patient, baseline, and he has pneumonia and ARDS. Half of our patients like this, right? So he has both. He has restrictive lung disease and obstructive lung disease together. Which one is at play? We don't know which one is at play. This will tell you which one is at play. So if you order the normal settings and you find the ratio, 50%, then this patient is probably ARDS more than COPD. If you find that the ratio at, let's say, 0.5 second, the ratio is like 85%, then we prolong it to 0.7, okay, that's like still 80%. Prolong it to 0.9, oh, still like reading 75%, for example, or 74%, that's too high, right? Once you start to go to 0.9 seconds here, then you say, this mode is not the mode for this patient. I can use the same mode but switch it to bi-level as opposed to classic Aprv, because he's not tolerating the short you know, exhalation time. All right. So let's say you're practicing in the Northeast. So now you're an idiot. So you order the thing. The respiratory therapist is here to help you. And then he comes in and he says, I think you are an idiot because you ordered this and the gas is like this. 7.27, 90 PCO2. Saturation is 71%. So, which one is more pressing? Obviously, this is who cares about this? The patient gonna live with this. But this one is gonna kill the patient within 5 minutes, right? 10 minutes. So, what are you gonna do? You're gonna say, "I'm sorry, sir. I am an idiot. You do whatever you want." No, no. You have to work with him and tell him, we have 5 things to do to improve the saturation. So we'll start with Megan O'Connor.
Increase the high pressure?
Increase the high pressure, absolutely. All right, so let me ask you this. Where is the PEEP in this mode? The answer is there's no PEEP, right? We never mentioned the word PEEP here. It's high pressure, low pressure, about high time, low time. Some stupid modes of ventilation call it high PEEP and low PEEP, which confuses everybody. But the real name for it is high pressure and low pressure. So there's no PEEP. So conceptually, where is the PEEP? The PEEP here is actually closer to the high pressure. Why? Because I'm spending more time on the high pressure and very low time, negligible time on the low pressure. So majority of the pressures are close to that pressure. Again, there's no PEEP, but conceptually it's close here. So that means that the high pressure is equal to the peak airway pressure, is equal to the plateau pressure, and it's very close to the mean airway pressure, and very close to the peak. all of them are bunched up here, because of the time, you're spending more time there. So conceptually, you can conceive this mode as if all the other modes of ventilation, you ventilate like this: PEEP and ventilate above, PEEP, ventilate above. This one, consider it as if you're PEEP, ventilating below, PEEP and ventilating below. So that's why you end up getting so high PEEPs like this. So when I say high pressure of 35, that is the PEEP. The PEEP is around 35. You can consider that the PEEP. So how about that low pressure of 0 to 5? The lung never sees it. If you think about it, yes, it's written there. It actually affects this ratio, by the way, the pressure. I didn't want to confuse you, but it does affect the ratio too. And if you think about it, this wave never reaches the baseline, so the lung never actually sees that pressure, and that is the result of that is that this pressure is not the peak, right? The high pressure is it. All right, Professor Lyon, go for it.
And this is assuming like FiO2 is already at 100%, all that good
No,
stuff.
well, we can put the FI2 here. That's in order of preference. How about that?
Okay, but then could you go up on the high, could you prolong the high time?
Yes, that's number one. That's the most preferred. By going up on the high time, you're actually making it as if it's a recruitment maneuver. What's the recruitment maneuver? Recruitment maneuver is 35 of pressure for 30 seconds. This one is going to be 35 of pressure for 12 seconds, or 14 seconds, or whatever. That will give it more and more and more, okay? Usually prolonged by 1 or 2 seconds. So if you're 6 seconds, make it 8, and take it from there. It actually opens up all the alveoli that we drew yesterday. We drew multiple times. The ARDS lung model. Normal alveolus, hyperinflated, hypoinflated, and atelectatic. All of those were open. These were opened early, during 0.2 seconds, for example, 0.4 seconds, 0.8 seconds, 2 seconds or more. Everything is going to open. Once you go to the 8 seconds and stuff like that, everything is going to open. So imagine a mode of ventilation that opens all your alveoli, even the closed one, every breath, or every release breath. All right, what else, Professor God?
Decrease the low time if you're not at the minimum.
Yes, decrease the low time. Right? And by decreasing the low time, you're actually you're never gonna go beyond this ratio. So if you're like 60%, make it 40%, make it 60% the ratio by decreasing the low time. So to go from here to here, for example, and instead of this being 40%, it would be like 60%. You're keeping more air in, and as we talked about yesterday, oxygen needs more time to come out from the alveoli. It doesn't diffuse as fast as CO2, so you need it in the alveoli for some time, so it can diffuse out, right?
It's a dumb question. Can you ever really go up on the high time without going down on the low time? Right.
Oh, you can change them without they don't interact together.
Okay.
Some old vents, they actually have them attached together. That's why we may be confused about it. They have them like within the same respiratory rate. So instead of having a high pressure, low pressure, high time, low time, no, they have high pressure, low pressure, high time respiratory rate. So basically, when I use those vents, I just have to like calculate and say, okay, well, how much respiratory rate we have? We have whatever. Then it gives me 6 seconds per breath. More importantly, I want this to be. That's more important for like any small change can result in big problems, right? So I give that first, and whatever is left, I give it for the big time. So I wanted to give 6 seconds and 0.5 seconds for the low time, 6 seconds high time and 0.5 low time. No, I give 5.5 seconds for the high time and 0.5 for low time if I'm dealing with a stupid vent. And the problem with these stupid vents is that they were designed to, and it's old, but they were designed to actually do more by level than Aprv. For by level, the times are huge, so the changes doesn't, you can take a half a second from each, it's not a big deal. Alright, so what else? What else is left?
Increase your low pressure?
Increase the low pressure. By increasing the low pressure, you're putting resistance, on the air coming out, keeping more air, more oxygen inside, and then also affecting this ratio. All right, let's say that this is your gas here. 7.100 PCO2 per 100. Saturation is barely 90%. What are you gonna tell the nurse? Tell them I have 8 things. Let's go one by one. We can save this.
So could you go up on the low time? Because you want to prolong
Yes.
your exhalation to ventilate more, right?
So that's number 4. So it's, it's not the most preferred, but this is the most guaranteed way of improving your ventilation. Guaranteed. No question. No matter what the compliance is, this is the most guaranteed. But I put it as number 4 because it's almost like throwing the white towel. This mode of ventilation is a recruitment mode. Okay, so having a good low time is part of the mode. If you start saying from the beginning, oh my God, it's so acidotic, let me just prolong the low time. Obviously, you're never going to go outside this range. But still, if you're going down to like make the ratio 30% or 25% or something like that, you're sacrificing the recruitment. So you're looking for the early fruit, but down the line you're not going to have the improvement that you would wish for from that mode, right? So it is guaranteed. It's easy. We'll see the effect right away, but don't do it. Just try to do the 3 above first. What else? Oh my God!
Decrease the high time.
Huh? What?
Decrease the high time.
Decrease the high time. That's the most preferred. See? Have you ever seen a radiologist that can answer this stuff? When you'll be sitting there reading X-ray and then calling the ICU resident and say, "Hey, I think you should increase your high time because the thing is inflated too much." All right. Anyway, so decrease the high time. What is the respiratory rate in this mode? Did we mention respiratory rate here? We didn't. There's no respiratory rate. So this determines the respiratory rate. We're not gonna play with the classic Aprv. We're not playing with the low time because the low time is so sensitive. We're gonna play with the high time, and that will determine our respiratory rate. So if you're giving 6 seconds high time and 0.5 low time, you probably will having a 9 breaths per minute. If you increase it a little bit more, if you decrease it to 4, you're probably getting about 13 or 14 breaths per minute, and so on. What else, Megan?
Decrease your high pressure?
No.
Okay.
Try something else. How about increase the high pressure? And I'll give you a bonus. Decrease the low pressure. It's like bypass. You're trying to increase the delta. So increase the high pressure, decrease the low pressure, and now you have a bigger Niagara fall, right? And that will give you a bigger tether volume. We talked yesterday about who cares about the tether volume here. It will be sometimes huge, but it says the ARDS network study doesn't apply to this one. Okay, what else? Number 5.
Increase the low pressure or something like that.
No, it should decrease.
But there's one that you could do both ways.
Oh,
right?
that's the bypass. Huh? So increase the pressure support. We never touched the pressure support, right? Pressure support, if you increase it, it will improve all of the small breaths, right? All of these small breaths will actually be bigger.
And this is APRV, not bilevel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But both the APRV and bilevel have pressure support in them because of the small breaths, right? So you increase basically your spontaneous minute ventilation.
Mhm.
It goes, let's say, from 100 to 150 each breath, and that will count. You don't add up, and you have more minute ventilation that way, right? But why is it number 5? Huh? It's number 5 is because another claim to fame to this mode, which is like what, number 6 or 7 now, huh? Another claim to fame to this mode, which is this mode of ventilation is not only introduced as a recruitment mode and a weaning mode and all of these things that we talked about. It's also a mode that improves VQ matching. So when you give somebody positive pressure ventilation, like volume control, you're pushing air in, the air will go into the path of least resistance, so we'll open up the west zone number 1 of the lung first. We'll just open up this and distend it even more. and then start to fill less and less and less, and the least filling happen in the zone number 3. That's because it's positive pressure ventilation. If you have negative pressure ventilation, which this mode depend on, these, although look negligible, they're actually very valuable. 100 cc or 150 cc of a spontaneous breath is much better than 300 machine breath. Because when you do like this, it's well distributed, relatively better distributed than the other mode and uniformly distributed. That's why the spontaneous breathing is good. And that's why the pressure support is number 5. Because we're afraid that if we add pressure support, that we will negate that benefit. The negative breathing will switch it into a positive breathing, and will negate that benefit. So that's why we're reluctant to put patients on pressure support. And every time you order this mode, you're probably ordering 0 pressure support. Okay? The only time we order some pressure support on the patient is that if we are weaning the patient and the pressures are going so low, and the patient now is complaining that there's no support, we'll give him some support to go through the weaning process. The other reason that we don't do pressure support also is that the high pressure. So we typically don't like to give patients more than 35 maximum airway pressure, right? So if you already went through the algorithm and raised the high pressure already 35, if you add anything else, that's going to be above that. All right, what else? Number 6. Oh my God! Oh my God!
I mean, we ran out of parameters.
We ran out of parameters. Yes, you're right. So let's like think outside the vent now. What are we gonna do? Decrease sedation. So most of the other controlled modes of ventilation, they will actually, you have the patient who is doing badly. What are you gonna do? You're gonna sedate the patient more. Still doing badly, you're gonna paralyze the patient. You take over. Every time the patient does worse, you take over more. This mode of ventilation is the opposite. Patient is doing worse, especially with acidosis. You decrease the sedation, which means that you're gonna increase this amount of breathing here. The rule of thumb is that you have to have at least one negative pressure breathing on every cycle like this, right? So if you see this empty, you walk in the room and find those 6 seconds or something empty, there's something wrong. Either we're hyperventilating the patient or the patient is over-sedated. So you tell the nurse, now please, we need to titrate at least one breath here. And of course you can increase it more and more by decreasing sedation and improve your... The other two, I'm gonna put them here not because they're like specific to this mode of ventilation, but it's actually I'm gonna put them here because it's used frequently in this mode of ventilation, which is TAM, which is, we don't have it currently in the United States, but it's coming hopefully, and the removal of the dead space. These two, for any mode of ventilation, will improve. But I put those, especially the TAM, because this mode of ventilation, by the way, especially the classic Aprv, it might not, you might not be happy with the acidosis part of the equation. You know what I mean? It's more of a hypoxia mode of ventilation, this one. The bi-level is the opposite. Or, both of them are good for both, but like this one, Aprv is good for both, better than other modes for both. But this is the claim to fame. The hypoxia is where the mode actually excels much higher than anything else. This one will lag a little bit, so that's why these adjuvants here have to be thought about it a little bit earlier.
What is THAM?
So THAM, we'll talk about it in details another time, but the quick thing is it's a buffer. It's the best buffer available. It's better than bicarb. When it takes the hydrogen, it doesn't become CO2 and water. Bicarb becomes CO2 and water. So that's why it can be used for lactic acidosis, it cannot be used for respiratory acidosis.
It's like a CO2 sink without.
Yeah, exactly. It takes the CO2 that gets excreted from the kidneys. So it is the best buffer. Unfortunately, it's extremely cheap. So the company stopped making it because they don't make money, and now we're not even importing it. I called the FDA, by the way, about it, and we said the critical care committee here actually we made a kind of a request, and they said we can't do anything about it. The company stopped. Of course they can do something about it, but I don't know. FDA can't do anything about drugs. That's great, right? Anyway, so let's talk about weaning of APRV. So there's two methods of weaning. One of them is called drop and drag. Be careful, you say this word only in the hospital, okay? Drop and drag. So, by the way, remember I told you the most important things that you need to learn in this is the flow waveform, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you forgot everything and you went to Niagara Falls or something and you don't have, this is the second thing that you need to learn. Right? Don't forget these two. So until you get the internet connection, then, you know.
I saw that immediately and I was like, great.
Exactly. That's what I'm gonna remember, okay? I forget everything else. So if you're asked, what do we do? Patient is having anything on the vent, increase the high pressure. Right? Easy now, okay? So the drop and drag is the most common method of weaning. And it's mainly is done for patients who are hypoxic still, or still needing recruitment. So typically when we put somebody on APRV, I demonstrate to the residents most of the time, if we do a classic APRV, that the lung looks better. On the x-ray, when you're reading x-rays next year, you're gonna say, these people, they switched to APRV, let me call them. Or write it in the note, you know. Patient switched to APRV, clinical correlation required. Right? And the resident's gonna say, really? Oh, I don't know, because I never see the vet. The respiratory therapist is the one that does everything on the vet, right? Anyway, so when you see somebody that is still hypoxic a little bit, you know, 92, 93, or still having schmutz on the x-ray, still not completely recruited, these are the patients you wean using drop and drag, because you don't want to affect the oxygenation. So how does drop and drag do? The name is very telling, right? So basically you have, this is your wave. So basically what you do, you touch only anything that has the word high next to it, right? So you touch the high time and the high pressure, you don't touch anything else. So you drop the high pressure and you drag it for a longer time. Drop the high pressure and drag it for a longer time. And keep doing that until it reaches very close to the low pressure, okay? How much you drop by 5 every time, so 35 to 30 and stuff like that, and you extend by 2 seconds every time. Okay, and how many times you do it every day? Nobody knows. I do it every 12 hours here. But I'm worried that having a rigid protocol might actually cause the same problem that SIMV had. If you were there when we talked about the SIMV, the way it died is that people have a rigid protocol every 6 hours something, and patients were ready to be extubated, but then you're doing a protocol. So be malleable, be flexible, and don't be rigid here, because by the way, this mode of ventilation, you don't do SBT every day, because you'll take the peak from 35 to 5 every day, twice. That's a disaster, right? So you cancel the SBTs, you just have to wean quickly. So sometimes I go every three times a day. I'm thinking actually to change the policy to make it every 3 times a day, where we actually wean this. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes, right? The reason this is good for patients who are hypoxic is what? Is that when you decrease the high pressure, what are you affecting? You're affecting the hypoxia, oxygenation, affecting ventilation, both, decreasing them, putting stress on them, right? But when you're prolonging the high time, you're further improving oxygenation, so you're neutralizing oxygenation, and further reducing ventilation and depending more on efficient ventilation. So you're putting more stress on the ventilation and neutral on oxygenation, right? That's why this is suitable for a hypoxic patient. All right, so let's say this one here. At some point we didn't reach that level yet, that we will extubate patients directly from APRV. You can actually. So what you do is that you keep going down on the pressures until the pressure is like 7/5, you know, nothing, or something like that, or similar to that. And actually you can actually add pressure support. So this is the peak, keeps going down until you reach to 5 with the high pressure, and then potentially you can start adding pressure support like we talked about when you're weaning the patient. Patient is not complaining too much, you know, not getting anything. Imagine if this is like 15 times 14 seconds. And this one is 5 times 0.5 seconds. What is the breathing? We're not breathing for the patient at all. We're just, every 14 seconds, we're making one breath. And he's breathing on top, so his breathing is mainly the one on top. We're giving him only four breaths per minute, and the height of those breaths is from 15 to 5, which is not a big deal. Huh? So for those, you add the pressure support to them, if they need, right? And you wean that way. But of course, we didn't reach that. No hospital reached that level where you actually extubate directly from pressure from Aprv. So we have to switch to pressure support. We have to switch to the SBT mode of ventilation. Or we have to tell the respiratory therapist, when is it suitable to start doing SBTs? We told them don't do SBTs, right? Now we're saying, okay, now you can do SBTs. So if you're 15, if this example stands here, what's the equivalent settings on SBT? And I added pressure support of 10, for example. So you have 15-second high time, 15 pressure for 14 seconds, 5 of pressure for 0.5 seconds, and we added pressure support of 10 to support the patient. What is the equivalent settings on pressure support for this?
That's 5 times 0.5 seconds.
That's 5 for 0.5 seconds, yeah.
I mean, it's almost the same as like PEEP of 10 and like, I mean, a PEEP of 15 and like high, or the other pressure of 35.
No,
Of 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not 25, it's
Oh,
pressure support
yeah,
of 10.
it's just on top, yeah.
So I would say 90% of people will do this mistake. They will say, okay, well it's 15 and 5, so it's 15 over 5, meaning 15 pressure support and 5 of PEEP. That's wrong. Basically, you took the PEEP from 15. You see, remember, we said the PEEP is the high pressure. You took the PEEP from 15, went down to 5 suddenly, right? If you want to do that intentionally, if you're doing that intentionally because the patient improved, I'm all for it. But if you're doing it idiotically, then you're an idiot. Okay? So the equivalent is 15 of PEEP, and whatever above it, I don't care what you put above it, 10 pressure support or something. We still have some weaning to do. Okay? Now, let's talk about the other ways of type of weaning, which is called bi-level weaning. Now we started to go into the bi-level territory now. But bi-level weaning is that you're changing the mode into a bi-level. The word bi-level indicates that you have two levels that are close to each other and in height and in length. So if this is your wave, remember the drop and drag, we said we only touch the high only? Here you touch everything, high, low, everything. Trying to make these two levels close to each other in height and in length. So decrease the high pressure and shorten the high time. Increase the low pressure and lengthen the low time. And do it again. See how closely we came to each other? Right? They became almost high. So let's say you reach 2. This one is 20 or 25 for 4 seconds, and this became 10 for 3 seconds, or 8 for 3 seconds. Okay? And we're getting closer to each other now. And you want to switch them now to pressure support. You know, once you start to go into bi-level territory, you can do SBT every twice a day as usual. But what's the equivalent settings here?
Now your PEEP is 8, right? Because 3 seconds is enough.
Exactly. Now your PEEP is 8. Because 3 seconds is enough time for any lung to reach the baseline and stay on the baseline for a long time. And by the lung reaching the baseline, that means the lung started seeing what? Started seeing the low pressure. So when you have 3 seconds here, then the lung actually have seen the 8, so the PEEP is 8. And whatever pressure support on top of it. So this is actually faster way. The bi-level weaning is a faster way of weaning than the drop and drag, but it's used much less because most of the time when we put somebody on this, it's actually hypoxic and terrible. So that's why this is more suitable. This is like, you made a mistake basically. You put the patient on it and now you're saying, no, he's improving very quickly. I give him Lasix and everything. Right? So that's your bi-level. Which brings me to, what's the difference between Aprv and bi-level? So unfortunately, most vents have APRV, actually all vents, have APRV and bilevel the same mode. So in order to get them, you have to press the same button, which confuses people, right? Because APRV and bilevel cannot be more different than each other in the way they mean for the patient and for the lung and the characteristics and physiology and all this, right? For example, like shunt and dead space, for example. You know, shunt and dead space are both VQ mismatch, but they're completely different. It's actually the exact opposite of each other. It's just on the two, you know, further the points of the same spectrum, right? These are the same. So when is it the time where the APRV switches? When you switch something, what parameters you change it to a certain level that changes the APRV into bilevel? Professor God. Huh? Huh?
What? I spaced out.
You spaced out. Everybody's spaced out, apparently.
I didn't space out, I just saw
I
the.
just
I walked
answer.
Alright, so it's the low time. Remember we said, you know, the low time, if it increases, then you actually reaches, this will reach to the baseline and all those things, and you'll start seeing the low pressure and stuff like that, the low time. If the low time becomes 1 second or more, right? I made up this, by the way. There's no guidance. So, but somebody has to come up with something, otherwise we'll go crazy. So, 1 second or more, that means you reach the baseline. That means the patient now is in bilevel, not in APRV. And by the way, in bilevel, we don't agonize over this. We don't measure this at all. This ratio is not measured because the patient, we know that the 1 second is enough to reach the baseline. Who cares, right? So totally different mode of ventilation, just by increasing the low time more than 1 second. Okay, let me ask you this, Professor Megan. What's the other parameter that has to go up every time the low time goes 1 second or more? The low pressure, right? Because if we leave the low pressure 0 to 5, and you just the only thing you've done is just increase the low time, then the lung is going to see this very, very low pressure. So the low pressure has to go hand in hand with the low time, right? That increases, and that other one increases too. All right. So imagine the possibilities now.
Are we going up in the low pressure to prevent like full collapse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in theory, if you're weaning someone, at
What?
some point you're not gonna like keep going up on their low pressure, right?
Yeah, you're right. Well, that's what the bi-level weaning. He's still going up on this every time, and then at some point you'll say, okay, we met at 15 for example, and we're just gonna put you on a breathing trial at that time. You're right. That's why it's not a very no.
Send it.
Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So imagine the possibilities now, right? So we have now a patient who on pressure controlled ventilation, right? So we talked about the possibilities here. This is not a possibility. It's almost a necessity to switch from here to here. But imagine in an ICU that you're using pressure control, volume control. Let's say pressure control. Imagine that I have a patient with inverse ratio pressure control. He's not that sick. I don't want to switch him to APRV, whether my respiratory therapists are not familiar with it, or it's not the first time to start you know, by the way, if you decide to take this to another hospital, right, and say, okay, I'm going to bring this to another hospital because I know how to use APRV, don't start with the APRV, start with the bi-level, right? If you're bringing something new, bi-level is much easier and palatable and less complications. And then you can start saying, okay, you know what, I feel like prolonging this time and shortening this time. Okay, we went to the APRV territory, okay? But anyway, the pressure control, let's say 2 to 1 I2 ratio, this patient is paralyzed now, right? I want to switch him to something that will get rid of the paralytic, but give me the exact same wave. Nothing else, like no, exact same wave, like exactly the same, like this. On bi-level. There is actually equivalent settings. You can just move between these two and have the same And you will not tell the difference between the two waves unless the patient breathes here and breathes here. Okay? So, and this exercise is very important for you, and it's also on your app, because when we send somebody to rehab from our bi-level, the rehab doesn't have bi-level, so they tell you switch him to equivalent pressure control, right? So inspiratory pressure 20, PEEP 15, I to E ratio 1 to 1 or 2 to 1, a respiratory rate of 20. Let's do that quickly. FiO2 of 100%, for example, right? We're gonna switch it to bi-level. What's the high pressure? What's the low pressure? What's the high time? What's the low time? What's the pressure support? And what's the FiO2? So I'll tell you the easy way to do it. Anybody wants to jump in?
So your high pressure is your peak, right?
Nothing bi-level.
35.
So in bi-level, when we,
Oh, cause you're prolonged low time.
yeah, you prolong. So the low pressure
Your
is the
low
peak.
pressure.
So the first thing to do is do the 100%. Okay, that's easy. Pressure support 0 always. So we got 2 out of the 6. Low pressure is the PEEP. So how much? 15. What's the high pressure? Let me make it easy here. That's the PEEP, and that's the inspiratory pressure. So inspiratory pressure above the PEEP and pressure control. Here, the high pressure goes all the way down to 0 here, and the low pressure is from here to here. So the high pressure encompasses the low pressure.
35.
So 35. So 15 plus 30, that's 35. Okay, now high time and low time? Depends on the respiratory rate, right? The respiratory 20, 3 seconds for breath, this is 2 seconds, and this is 1 second. So you have the same mode of ventilation now with the advantage. No need for paralysis, the patient will breathe on his own. Great. So that's amazing. So why did we switch here? Why did we switch to all the modes of ventilation become bi-level? Like, that's a huge decision to actually say everybody who comes to this ICU is going to be bi-level. That's like crazy, right? But why did we switch? Obviously, all the advantages and the claims, the 8 claims to fame that I told you this lecture, but add to it also another claim to fame, the 9th, which happened to us when we were doing pressure control. We were a pressure control hospital, ICU. Yeah, patients will come to us, we put them on 1-to-1 I to E ratio, 1-to-1 I to E ratio, and ventilate them that way. When we had 1 SBT a day, it was easy for the respiratory therapist, and it wasn't stress on the system. The nurse turns off the sedation. By the time she calls the respiratory therapist, he finishes what he's finishing. By the time he comes, the patient is awake. You put him on a pressure support SBT, that's fine. Nobody's complaining about it. When we started doing 2 SBTs a day, what happened is that now the respiratory therapist is in CAT scan, for example. So the nurse turns the sedation and then calls for the respiratory therapist. He comes in with 15, 20 minutes later, half hour, 1 hour later to actually switch the patient to pressure support, and we started seeing problems. And the problem manifested as the nurse is saying the patient is not even tolerating the SAT. Not the SBT. We didn't even put him on the SBT yet. Just the wake up. We just woke him up, turn off the sedation, and the patient is already breathing in the 50s, right? And why is he doing that? Because we didn't know initially, and we started saying, okay, maybe he's agitated, maybe this, and then we found the problem. The problem is when the respiratory therapist, when you order 1-to-1 I to E ratio, because you don't want everybody to be paralyzed, right? And it's 20 breaths per minute. There's nothing on the machine that says I to E ratio. Set parameter. The set parameter is the I time. So the respiratory therapist calculates, say 60 divided by 20, that gives 3 seconds per breath. I'm going to give half of that in inhalation, and assume that the other half is going to be exhalation. What is the first thing now that the patient does when he wakes up? Before he even opens his eyes, he breathes faster. So when he breathes faster, he breathes more than 20. You have less than 3 seconds per breath, but the I time is stable at 1.5 seconds. I'll meet you in 2 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. All right, anyway, so 1.5 seconds, okay? So that caused the problem. Every time you wake the patient up, if you're taking too long to put them on pressure support, they're actually inversing their own ratio and resulting in problems. There's some parameters that we can play with, I'm not gonna bore you with it, that can do that, but it also causes other problems. So what we decided is that why don't we just switch to bi-level, which actually gives you 2 levels exactly the same, and the patient, when he wakes up, breathes on top here and breathes on top here, right? Okay. So the night I am switching to bi-level, I'm having diarrhea. Why? Because I can kill people with this, right? So Professor Megan comes in, overdoses on her heroin, and then she has a normal lung. We put her, she's only an event for airway protection. She doesn't have an ARDS lung, right? She doesn't have it. So then we're giving her the breath. We're giving, and then Professor Lyon, he's like, okay, I forgot. You know, the APRV bi-level, they're all the same. Just go, that mode that Cal likes, what do they call it? The APR. Put her on APRV, right? So then, so then the respiratory therapist listens to what you're saying and put her on classic APRV. So imagine Professor Megan with a normal lung. We give her APRV, 6 seconds high time, 35 high pressure, 5 of low pressure, and 0.5 low time. What's gonna happen to Professor Megan?
My lungs are gonna explode.
No. Your lung is elastic. Your lungs are great. Nothing is gonna happen to them. You're gonna die. You're gonna have a cardiac arrest. Why? Because what's your CVP? Less than 5. Okay. 35 of pressure in a normal lung will be translated 100% to the alveoli. The capillaries around the alveoli will be blanched. There will be no blood in it, and there'll be no venous return, and only the small time here will give you venous return. Over time, you'll be like, why is she dropping her blood pressure? Let's put a central line. She's in septic shock. All of these things, and it's all about defense. So we can kill somebody if we don't use the terms correctly. So that's why anytime you hear somebody saying APRV and it's not corrected, the term is bi-level, and I do the same. They hate me, but it doesn't matter, right? So. Because of that, we lied to people. We made a rule, and we actually lied to everybody. Said, you cannot change, you cannot have bi-level with high time and low time that are not equal. So you can always guarantee in this hospital, when you do bi-level, that the high time and the low time are equal. So that's why we go from 2 and 2, 4 and 4, 3 and 3, 6 and 6, 8 and 8. Because if somebody makes a mistake and prolongs it so much, I know that at least the low time is also as long, and you get a bigger venous return during that time, right? So that's the lie that I know you're tempted sometimes to go 3 and 2, don't. 2 and 2, 3 and 3, all again. And we had to come up with something that rhymes, so this is the something that rhymes. 28, 8, 2, 2. Basically, high pressure 28, 8 is the low pressure, 2 and 2. That's very similar to what we were using in pressure control anyway, because in pressure control we were using 28 pressure, 8 of PEEP, and 14 respiratory rate as a start. This is 15 respiratory rate, so it's not a big deal. And also always 1-to-1, and this is 1-to-1.
So you kind of default to those settings for most people when you first.
Yeah, that's if you don't remember, then just tell the respiratory rate, the usual, and this is 28, 8 to 2. And the surprise that we got from this, and this we'll talk about it another time, is that what's the most common gas in our ICU? Respiratory alkalosis, which means that this mode of ventilation recruits more lung, because with the same minute ventilation, it actually gives you respiratory alkalosis. All right, we'll stop here because it took a long time. Any questions? Yes. Did it come? Yes, come in.